Good evening, buonasera a tutti, guten Abend. I'm Sascha Mentz from the Institute of Technology in Architecture at the Department of Architecture here at ETH Zurich. And I'm very proud to announce Paola Viganò now at EPFL in Lausanne. Welcome, Paola. Ciao. I see you, and I tried to organize that you are a co-host, co-moderator. I hope this works. We trained this before. This is great to have you all here in this room, in this virtual room. I'm very, very happy that this is the attendance is so numerous. And I would like to quickly introduce Paola Viganò, which of course everybody here in the group will know. I will not make it too long. Paola, you are architect and urbanist. You are full professor for urban theory and urban design at EPFL, and you are also a full professor at the Università di Venezia. And I saw in your CV you have numerous awards. You're really a wonderful researcher, and also you have the title as Doctor in Honoris Causa by the UCL. And I think what you will tell us tonight really affects the real world, the actual world. You come with extreme actual questions to us. You will talk about designing for new climates. It's, for me, one of the highly important topics nowadays, really important topics. And I'm really very curious to see how you will do, and I hope we will engage into a very open and great conversation at the end of your talk. At the moment, everybody is muted, and at the end I will release this. For questions, please use the chat, because Esther, our coordinator of the Institute today, will not attend, and so I have to do it here with the support of Suzanne, but you will see it will work at the end. So Paola, I don't want to make it really too long. I think you should start, and I'm happy to get a new understanding of your design experiences. And of course, as you mentioned in your email before, you will talk also on different scales, which I think is quite important if we talk about cities, if we talk about settlement systems, as we do at the Future Cities Lab here in Zurich and in Singapore. I think there will be a lot to debate at the end. So thank you so much for being here. It's an honor for us here at ETA, a colleague from EPFL. So we bridge Lausanne with Zurich. The screen and the tone is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sascha. I have to say that the connection while you were speaking was not perfect. So let me know if you can hear well and if everything is working. So thank you for your invitation, Sascha. Grazie per il tuo invito, Sascha. I've recently discovered that Sascha is Italian. Doesn't look like, but he is. So I will start immediately to share with you my presentation, so we can also see if this is working. Okay, so let me know if you see a full screen.
We see not the we see your screen, but we see also now we see the full screen. Yeah, now okay. It's perfect. Thank you so much.
Good. So designing for new climates. I mean, to speak today of new climates is clearly not only speaking of temperatures, is speaking of something that is affecting and and putting all, let's say, our life in a kind of unstable position. And I would like to start from two quotations, two authors speaking about climate change. The first, James Neumann, climate change as a stressor, which I think is very important to consider, that first of all, climate change, so this extreme conditions that we will more and more frequently reach in terms of temperatures, in terms of flooding, in terms of different extremes that will be touched, is first of all affecting all our living environment, and is stressing, in fact, our say infrastructures. And this is not only a problem from the point of view of the monetary investment, but it's also, it will require very probably also a redistribution of individual and collective responsibilities. If I think, for example, to water management, it is clear that we will not be able to solve all the problems just with big investment in big infrastructures, but we will have also to rely on very diffuse systems of infrastructures that will need a maintenance that is will not only be guaranteed by the state, by the big collectivities, but also maybe by individuals or by small collectivities. So when I speak of redistribution of individual and collective responsibilities, I think that there is something touching the responsibility of each one of us. And this is something that is also related to the territory. The second reference is to something that Saskia Sassen was saying a few years ago about climate change as a connector and as a catalyzer. This is the way in which I try to work with and on climate change with our research and with our projects, considering that this specific condition, the changing of the climate, is acting as a conceptual, technical, and political catalyzer. Conceptual because we are forced, for example, towards a more and more interdisciplinary research. So we need really to put together the different disciplines, the different point of view. We need to rethink technically our environment. And of course, there is a strong socio-political aspect, that dimension that is very important in constructing a new position towards climate change. So starting from these two references, I would like to show you two works. The first one is about the study for a vision for the Great Geneva. In both cases, and the second one is in the west of France. In both cases, the point is how today we can design this transition, this urban transition. How can we start to modify our spaces and also the practices that we are engaged in. And in the case of Great Geneva, say the title we gave was Towards a New Biopolitical Project. So this biopolitical dimension is very present in the work and in the research I'm doing in this last years, because I think that we are brought not to rethink the role of space in an idea of the capacity of space to emancipate every single individual, but also we are brought to think the different relations with nature, and I think that the deep ecology thinking is very relevant in this case. And we are also more and more reconsidering the power relations among us, and among, say, the different components of society, but also between us and the non-human component of our habitat. So there are really questions related to life, space, politics. So that's why I speak of biopolitics. And in Great Geneva, we took two lenses. One is the soil, and the second is labor, or let's say the work. And we realized that, of course, transitions are never the first transitions. So the transition of which we are speaking is in fact the continuation of a transition that started already almost 50 years ago, when, for example, the big transition, Geneva was an very important industrial city, and became practically today, the 93% of the economy is related to the tertiary sector. So Geneva completely changed its economical basis. It was a transition in terms of lifestyles. We were close also to 1968. And these are some shots from the Alain Tanner, the movie he realized, Jonas, that will be 25 in 2000. That was localized in Geneva. And in this movie, there are already practically all the themes that we are discussing today. So looking for new relations with the territory, with the ground, with the soil, looking for new forms of work. The very divaricated, very imbalanced relations between the French side and the Swiss side. Today, the Great Geneva is really imbalanced territory. You have almost the 80% of the jobs are on the Swiss side. The 65 of the housings are on the French side. You have about 85,000 daily commuters. And we know that during the pandemic in Switzerland, so we can apply this also to Great Geneva, maybe it was even higher, but the 50% of the Swiss worked from home. So a big transformation of the way in which we can imagine to use space is related to this discovery that we could, in fact, work at home, and we could be, let's say, efficient and productive also in that situation. With climate change, these kind of new conditions deserve a new reflection on the inevitability of the metropolis. Here we see an image of the Alpine Lehmann metropolis, where you have all the different risks to which the territory is subjected, the instability of the slopes, the flooding risk, the heat temperatures that will be, of course, mainly concentrated in the very urban areas. And I think that this is asking, in a way, to look at this territory with different eyes, with a different approach that I synthesize in this expression, the territory as a subject. You know, we started to look at the territory, the different dimensions that form this territory as subjects. So the water is a subject, the soil is a subject, the different landscapes are subjects. And this model, we realized, was an attempt to clarify the individuality of each part. Each small water course has its own space, each slopes, in a way that we are obliged to consider that this is not a kind of neutral support on which we are simply putting our intentions, our ambitions, but these are subjects with their own rationality, with their own logic, and we are working with them in order to make, let's say, a vision for this territory. The territory as a subject, but also a metropolis that is made of villages. In fact, the Great Geneva has, of course, Geneva, that is the densest part of the metropolis, but is made of hundreds of villages that we see, and the villages are on the mountains, on the slopes, close to the lake, along rivers. This is the Great Geneva. And today, the half of the population of Great Geneva live, in fact, in this type of situation. So live in villages that are difficult to connect to the main city, villages that make it difficult to solve, for example, the problem of accessibility to the center with the traditional TOD system, so the transit-oriented development, because they are spread. They are in all parts of the territory. And it is quite interesting, the fact that the last decades of planification, they've been dealing fundamentally only with the dense part, as if all the rest could find a solution in a way or in another. But today, as we see here, we are really in a very interesting moment in which the blue and the rose colors that are representing the villages that were more active, growing, and the villages that were losing population that today are, on the contrary, growing, are more or less half of the city in black and the periphery of cities. So half of the population, in fact, today lives in this type of situation. And almost all of them are dormitories, because, as we said, there is a concentration of all the jobs in one part of Great Geneva, which means that there is this imbalanced use of the territory. A metropolis made of villages is a metropolis that is different from the traditional metropolis, as, for example, Paris. So we still have to understand that the metropolitan areas can be made in this way, and they work in a very integrated way, but they are different from the traditional image we have of the big city, of the metropolis, and they deserve specific strategies. So to use soil and labor as main lens, we developed a series of scenarios, and I would like to spend a few words on the soil scenarios mainly. As you probably know, in Switzerland, there are quite rigid rules about maintaining the agricultural activities. And there are the best, let's say, agricultural areas that in the Great Geneva are this amount of hectares. But in fact, this is not really enough, not for feeding, not for ecological reasons. So we need to go really beyond this. We need to go towards an urbanism of the living soil, where the soil is something that is, again, not considered as an object, but as a true agent and subject inside the decisions that have to be made on the territory. So our first scenario is simple, is what if we can use the soils of Great Geneva to contribute to reduce the CO2 emissions? As you know, the different types of soils can have a different capacity to absorb, to stock carbon. And we can imagine to raise the carbon stock in Great Geneva soils to reach these parameters of the 4 per 1,000. That is considered already a big step forward. And we know that if we, for example, if we transform some of the soils as they were in the past in wet areas, there is a large part of Great Geneva in which there were very important wet areas, this capacity would even be higher. What does it mean? This means to change the practices, means to change the type of agriculture, means to go towards conservation agriculture. I'm not going to stay in all the details, but there are several levers of action that we can imagine in the rural area, on the two sides of the border. But we have also levers that are in the urban part. And in the urban part, we can for sure use soils to reduce flood risks, to reduce heat waves. So we are speaking really of the urban soils that have until now very rarely studied, even by the pedologists that are, say, discovering them. Why they were not studying urban soils? Because they were imagining that they were just a marginal fraction of soils. But then we calculate, in fact, in the canton of Geneva. So this is not the scale of Great Geneva, because we didn't have the data for all the Great Geneva, but in the canton of Geneva, we discovered that the 30% of soils is urban, is in urban context, and we are not calculating here of course, roads, infrastructure, and not even, of course, the built. So we are really speaking of the open spaces, so soils, very often mineral soil, but not just mineral, that are inside the urban part. And they are at the same, more or less, proportions as the agricultural milieu. So, which means that they are really an important part of the canton. And when pedologists that were working with us, they understood that this fraction was not marginal, I think that this contributed very much to a change of understanding of the role that they might play inside this process of adaptation. So this urban soil is a kind of hidden resource that we can imagine in the future to transform and to consider as an important lever on which we can rely. A third scenario was related to the food self-sufficiency. Great Geneva, of course, is totally dependent from the French side, because the canton of Geneva is already quite dense. But today is not a good example, a good reference. However, there are enough, let's say, soils that if we imagine to modify our diet, to adapt our diet, so to, as you know, reduce the meat consumption, etc., we can imagine that in the future we can go very close to a food self-sufficiency when we consider the scale of Great Geneva. So although we will not probably reach this self-sufficiency, nevertheless, there is quite a big margin of work. And what is very important is also to consider the energy, and especially the local energy that can be used to produce food in the Great Geneva. And we can understand that there are some types of cultivations that could be very coherent. For example, the fruit trees, they can rely on almost 100% of local energy, while other types of cultivations are very much dependent on on energy that is coming from the outside. So this is also something very important in order to understand how to transform this agriculture. And this, of course, will transform also the landscape of Great Geneva, where every single square meters of soil can be considered as a productive opportunity. I go very quick on the other scenarios that were related, for example, to the way in which work, production, the industrial areas in Great Geneva can be transformed in the future, and especially in the work we did with Walter Steil, that was a very important figure, but that already since the end of the 70s was reflecting on the idea of a longer product life cycles. So if we imagine that in the future we will produce better and much less, and we will use much longer, all our products, then we thought that there is a place where this kind of a big workshop for the entire metropolitan area, a place where you can repair everything, could be imagined, was the Arve Valley, where there is a very important district related to the bar turning industry. But this industrial district is today declining because it was very much related to the production, to the automobile industry that was based in Geneva in the past, and that now has disappeared. And there will be in the future, in the next future, the need to adapt, to rethink this district. So we were imagining that this kind of workshop valley, workshop city for reconditioning all the different objects could be a way to transform this kind of situations where we are not in the denser part of Great Geneva, but we are in this hybrid, rural, industrial, urban part where you can reuse the existing infrastructure and also the know-how in the direction of the reconditioning instead of the new production. And there are very interesting situations where you can really work together with agricultural production, industrial, say, small production, and the new activities and people. I come back a moment to the territory as a subject because I think that it is also thanks to this change of point of view that we started to be interested in not just in the very big infrastructures, but also in the weak infrastructures that could play an important role in the future of Great Geneva. Weak infrastructures that can be related to ecological connection, to the water management, to the biodiversity reinforcement, to also the solidarity and also the between, let's say, different social groups, and imagining that along certain lines you can organize also solidarity economies that can find in this kind of more marginal spaces maybe better occasions, no? to find space. And by putting together all these different themes, we arrived to formulate this hypothesis of a weak structure for the transition, which was inspired by the old and important plan by Braillard and Bodmer that more or less is of 1 century ago, almost 1 century ago. In this plan, in the 30s of the 20th century, Braillard and Bodmer, they were imagining public surfaces, continuous public surfaces that could integrate all the Canton of Geneva. They were working at the scale of the Canton of Geneva, connecting the different areas and connecting with public surfaces. That was the term that they were using. It was not just open space. There were some villages, there were heritage elements, there were some new also neighborhoods connected inside these public surfaces. The dimension, the surfaces that were used for that were quite important. And in our attempt to prolong this vision at the scale of Great Geneva, we arrived to use the 38% of the basin of Great Geneva. But already inside these surfaces, there is more than half is already wood forest. So it's something that is already protected. So you are not going to modify this the situation. There are, the 10% is more or less wet areas or floodable areas. So again, also there you can say that it's not fundamentally necessary to go and transform and build inside this kind of areas. There is a 10-11% of urban areas and then agriculture. So there are different areas that can be connected, putting, say, together floodable areas, for example, some agricultural areas that can give a thickness to this system of ecological and social connections. The active mobility that could be integrated inside it, and also, as I said before, some kind of economical activities, but that can be referred to specific sectors, for example, the sectors of the care. So all activities that can be related to taking care of the territory or taking care of certain part of the populations, social and solidarity type of enterprises. that can profit of, as I said, of some marginal areas that still exist inside this region. It seems a little bit abstract work, but in fact, after the Great Geneva consultation, we started to work with the Canton of Geneva exactly on this weak structure that can play a fundamental role as a kind of federative space for all the Great Geneva, bringing different types of services and especially this idea of continuity at the metropolitan scale that is at the same time a social continuity, but also an ecological continuity. To work together with the social and the ecological, I think is becoming more and more urgent today. We cannot divide the two fields. We cannot work just on the ecological and not on the social. And of course, we cannot do the opposite. But if you look at this image, that was an image of famous photographers, Boissonade, and they were a family of photographers at the end of the 19th century. You see here, what is represented is not only what today we would say is the heritage, but there are also cultural heritage, the practices, the type of jobs, work, the vegetation, or some monumental trees. Let's say we have to update this type of representation. Is the interest is not to go back to the village-like scale or to something that is completely out of our age, but is to work in a very cohesive way on the different dimensions and to speak at the same time of types of economy, ecological aspects, mobility aspects, and social concerns. So this is a little bit the type of mesh that this weak structure is composing. We consider this weak structure a new infrastructure for the 21st century metropolis. And it is not in opposition with the traditional hard infrastructure that is related especially to mobility, so the railway lines, the tramways, etc. They can work together, but they can profit one of the other because, for example, the active mobility that is more inside the weak structure has to be connected, not to, of course, to the mobility infrastructure. And here our proposal is the one of recover the numbers of railways, for example, or tramways line that were existing in the past in the Great Geneva and that were sacrificed to the idea that the car could solve all the problems inside the territory. So we propose to reopen, for example, the railway lines that was present in all the Pays de Gex. All the Pays de Gex today is without any public transportation line, a strong public transportation line. You have some buses, and that's all. Practically, it's totally dependent on the car. Or to reconnect railways lines that are disconnected at the border today between Switzerland and France, that can even take, I mean, a bigger scale because they are continuous line, but interrupted at the border. A little bit in a synthetic way, what I try to show you is how we can work on eco-socio-spatial prototypes, where space is a fundamental starting from where we can reflect at the same time on ecology, on society, on economy. And we think that space is really able to be a strong agent in the transition. If I have a few minutes, I would like to go maybe a bit quicker through the second case. This is not a vision for a big territory, but is a vision, yes, for the center of a smaller metropolis, that is the city of Brest, a city landscape, we call it, in transition. Visionary pragmatism is, I think, very important to take as a reference, in the sense that we need to be very pragmatic in this moment because we need the actions. But those actions cannot be just, let's say, related to the last urgency. We really need to be visionary and at the same time put our capacity to act into a larger frame and then in a longer also term frame. So Brest, for those that don't know this, Brest is the smallest metropolitan area in France, and for sure the most, say, far away. It's really on the ocean, one of the closest point of continental Europe to the US. And we had to work on a guide plan, a vision that contains, let's say, intentions and actions to be realized in the next decades in this city. Here you see some important features. We are on a very beautiful bay. La Rade of Brest is one of the really most beautiful bay in France. And you see a river, and this river has an estuarine character. And this city has been and is today a military city, in the sense that the French army has here a very important basis, and this relation between the city and the military areas is not easy, because the military areas have occupied all the banks of the river, and they are in a complete continuity, while the city is completely disconnected because of this river and because of the occupation of the lower part by the army, as well as the coast in large part is also taken by them. We have realized a stronger work with the citizens, very interesting in different occasions, bringing to the table artists, intellectuals, people, and of course politicians to discuss about the future of the city. We have proposed to work on the collective imagery, because I think that in this moment of transition it's very important to adapt the images, or to understand which are the images that we use to vehicle our ideas about a certain place. But it's also important to understand that we have to probably change or adapt those images. And for this city is a very literary city, so there are a lot of novels about Brest, very important ones. So it's a place that has been really part of narratives, and it's a Finisterre, so it's really at the end of the world in a certain sense. So there are many different interesting images that can speak of this city. One of them is the gray city. For everybody, this is a gray city, and we could not really understand why it was considered like that. It's a city that has been, the center has been reconstructed after the Second World War, because it was completely destroyed by the bombs during the war. And the reconstruction has been made on a grid with this kind of blocks. And it is on a natural condition that is really spectacular, with the large falaise, big denivelations between the higher part and the lower part, and this beautiful water mirror that is there. So in this situation, we proposed a series of strategic spaces, and more importantly, a diffuse project of inevitability. So as you understand, the question of inhabit a place is fundamental to work into the transition, to walk into the transition. And I think it's not fundamental to stay on all those projects. Here you just see them passing through the corniche. So it's the valorization of all the areas that are around the military ones, which is also a way to bring the city and the pressure of the city closer to the military areas, so that some decision that the army is taking of leaving some spaces back to the city could be taken with say a little bit more conviction, because they cannot really understand if it is they can do it or not, but still the city is waiting for some of these spaces. The system of accessibility between the railway and the station, that is a station that is really the conclusion of the railway line, because it's after that there is the ocean, and the port. So again, a big denivellation between the higher and the lower parts, and let's say different aspects that can be described, but sorry, I'm not describing because I want to get to the last point. A metropolitan system of parks that is related to the presence of this river, but also the minor valleys that arrive and that are much more complicated from the point of view of the water management than the main river. Here we can understand that there are big changes for the future, because all this part will be probably submerged with the sea level rise, and this change completely, let's say, the ambitions that the city can have on those areas, where we can imagine to stay, say, close to the water, and in a condition where maybe those big buildings will be practically with the feet into the water, and of course the type of uses you can imagine will be different than a simple ground in the city. Not easy questions to discuss with the politicians that are used to very short-term mandates, so they are not used to project themselves not to 20 or 30 years. We said that these minor valleys, where the problem is to start to demolish eventually some of the buildings that have filled up the valley. For example, here we have a public building that we are proposing to be demolished in the next years because there are flooding problems in the city. And these are some of the studies that we are doing in this moment, where this small water course, we are looking on how we can accompany this water course through the city, and how this can find its own space, even with some operations of demolition that will probably be necessary. And in a more diffuse way, we have a series of strategies in order to act on the tissue. This is the tissue of the reconstructed city of Brest. In France, there are several cities that have been reconstructed after the Second World War. They are quite similar, but this one, Brest, is really the most impermeable. So this is, in fact, the map of the impermeable surfaces, and you see that it's really a block of concrete, practically, where also the interior of the housing blocks has been completely transformed and used for parking spaces. So they need to reopen some of these areas, and it's not easy when you work on a diffuse type of project, because these are of course all private areas, and it's not it's an urban project, because it is important to do at the urban scale. It's not just a transformation of one block that is important, but it's when all the city can evolve. But as you can imagine, there are questions related to the parking, to the need to erase some of these areas, to demineralize areas, to requalify the buildings, and all these kind of problems that seems very necessary, if we want to go through this transition, in fact, are the most difficult. It's probably easier to transform the station, the harbor, etc., than to transform one of these residential blocks. And this is one of the paradoxes of the transition, because the transition project can only be serious if it can be diffuse, if it is really going through all the city. But this makes difficult not to work in this very, very diffused way. more in general, we have reflected on mobility and all the strategies to reduce the presence of cars in this very, very mineral space. And the goal is to transform also the public space in a way that not only the private part, but also the public part can help in this research of spaces for infiltration for the water, or space where to stock the water. And we can imagine that, because in fact there are already some decisions that have been taken in the past. Now you have a climate plan, for example. So let's really rely on those political decisions, and you can put close to this kind of diagrams the actions that can profit of the political choices. So you can reduce, for example, the space for parking, because there has been already a political decision about that. Of course, you know that then when you go to the people and you start to discuss this kind of aspects, this can be a bloody, let's say, a bloody discussion. And the fundamental point is that I consider today that all these kind of experiences, they are really experiment. They are really laboratories of the transition, and we accept to work with the different sectors of the city. Those are working on mobility, on public space, on infrastructures, on water management, etc. In order to try to construct a common discourse, a common practice, which is not really the case today. And there is, I mean, is already a revolution, the one of trying to make the transformation of the city in a different way. Is already a very big step, because this is not happening today. So to conclude, that's my last slide. I think that the design of the transition requires changes that we are not yet politically or economically capable of making and legislating. If last week I was at the presentation of the last results of the IPCC panel, there was one professor from the ITA Zurich, in fact, she's working with inside the panel. And so the question, as you probably know, is that there will be more and more extreme events in the future, both on the side of the, say, for example, flooding risk, but also especially on the side of the drought. And what is really incredible, that after this, I don't know, at least decades in which we are discussing about climate change, the CO2 emissions are not decreasing. They are not decreasing. So after the COVID, now we are back to the normal values, normal in the sense of the previous. So that's why I start with this strong statement that we are not capable of making it until now. So the only way in which I see we can work is to consider that we need really prototypes that I think are the only intellectually rigorous way of entering an unknown path. And also to consider that design is not only a protocol for problem solving. So design cannot solve easily. We need to test, we need to experiment, and we need prototypes. And in the field of urban and territorial design, the space of experimentation is intended to inspire collective debate, through which hypotheses are subjected to a process of verification or falsification, and the worldviews negotiated, because that's also for me very important. Of course, we have several different worldviews. We cannot imagine that in the future, in order to cope with climate change, we have to get to one unique worldview. I think this will be not possible. So we have to work with a plurality of worldviews. We have to accept that inside this transformation, different positions should be possible. I don't believe in the one position, the unique position. So I think we need to work also culturally, to work debating, to work bringing experiences, to test experiences, to bring people, let's say, together, the different sectors in a city as the different disciplines at the PFL or with the ITA. I mean, it's just bringing and try to put everybody in the position to express convictions and visions that we can try to understand what do we have in common at the end, no? And try to convince ourselves that there are possible common lines of activation, of action. And yes, I think I'm saying this really in the idea of visionary pragmatism, maintaining both terms, the visionary and the pragmatism. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paola, for these very visionary statements. I'm really impressed. I was asking myself when you showed breast, and then you, of course, you gave some answers. What would be the process to achieve these transitions? It's really an extremely, it's as you stated at the beginning, it's social, it's political, it's just more. It covers that the object really needs to be subjectified, or how we want to say, but we need more to talk about the subject. I'm absolutely with you. And what I see is that it's extremely interdisciplinary. We're not able anymore as urbanists, as architects, to solve it with the sketches. Too many elements, too many conflicts entering the scene. And on one hand, I see you a little bit without an answer on one hand, and on the other hand, I feel your energy. I can see that it's possible, but time is running, as you say. It's we are at the limits at the moment. So I would like to try. Let's see if it works. To see if are there questions from the public. So there is one, yeah. Okay, so this is a thank you. So if you have questions, please put them on the chat if you like. Let me see if somebody dares. Paola here. I see our colleague Paolo Burlando. You raised your hand, please, Paolo.
Yes, thank you very much for a nice talk. And of course, I'm a bit outside of the field, not being an urbanist, not being an architect, being an engineer. So I have more a technical question. And you mentioned you invested quite some time in explaining the role of soils in the Great Geneva project. And I was wondering whether there is in the overall project an estimate of how much back transforming the soil to their previous status could help reducing the urban heat island effect. In some studies we did in the past years, we observed that there is quite a significant difference between cities that have an extremely concentrated set of buildings and cities that are sparse and where the green is really much more spread, and that is reflected in the data, in temperature data that are observed. So I was wondering whether back transforming the soil can have an effect, and whether you were able to guesstimate what this effect could be in quantitative terms.
No, we made an estimation together with the pedologist that was working with us, that is a professor at the University of Geneva, about the capacity of soils to absorb the CO2 emissions. And that's quite I mean, it's not enormous, but it's fundamental, because when you will try to reduce, you will get easily, you can diminish for a little bit, but at a certain moment you will reach a point where it will be so expensive or so impossible to reduce the last fraction. And there is where the capacity of soils to absorb can become really strategic. So in that sense, there is the hope that soil can solve the last fraction of the CO2 emissions. About the heat island, we didn't calculate anything, but we know that what is fundamental are the small green spaces and not just the big parks, because each single island of green space can produce a microclimate or can lower the temperatures of several degrees around them. So this is in favor, for example, of a city that maintains green spaces here and there, really sparse. And this is in favor of not densifying cities as we are densifying today. For example, in this moment, we are also working with the city of Geneva, and we are criticizing some of the policies of densification that were imagined in the past. But this is happening in many other cities. And there is this kind of imposition of densifying in order not to expand the cities anymore. I agree on the fact that cities should not be expanded on fertile land, absolutely. But the point is that we should not diminish the resiliency of the city by closing all the different open spaces that can really have many different functionalities, not just for the temperatures, but for the infiltration of the water, for many different, for the biodiversity.
All the ecosystem services.
Exactly, for all them. And this is a little bit colliding with the kind of Bible, now that is densify, densify, densify. Also socially, the densification is becoming more and more conflictual and contrasted. And okay, let me say a few words that can be more theoretical, but the point is that we don't understand why these cities should continue to grow in this way, no? Why are they growing? What is the economic mechanism that leads to concentrate all the activities, all the resources and investment in few parts of the territory? Why today we consider this as a natural phenomenon? This is not natural. In the past, for example, in Switzerland, the policies were very different. There was the idea that you had to maintain the attractivity of the different part of the territory, that you should not transform a country in a country in which you have two cities, very attractive, and the rest of the territory that is marginal. This is not resiliency. Resilience is to maintain the people in different parts where the different part of the territory can be activated by the presence of humans. And I think that we are victim today of a kind of doxa that is really very strange, but is not convincing and it is not natural. So by reflecting on the idea of a horizontal metropolis, we were working in the direction of territories that can be autonomous enough, independent enough to guarantee inevitability, qualities of life in their different parts, and not the concentration in a few spots, because the concentration in few spots creates many other problems. One of these is to fill all the possible holes, and then to have problems of heat inside the city, for example.
Thank you. Thank you, Paola. So what we experience is, at least as I see, is a kind of a very clear separation nowadays of the understanding of urban, I call them urban areas, and landscape. So, and this separation, and you propose, let's say, this horizontal density, which I think makes a lot of sense, which is close to our culture, too, but then you need a kind of a trade-off, right? So you explained it with your soil scenarios, with the 30% of the area of Geneva can be opened, and there could be a trade-off. I think this could be an interesting strategy, but as you say, politics are not yet ready. Maybe society is not yet ready. Society was prepared. I see here in German speaking Switzerland, everything is vertical. So density, if you talk about density, then density needs to be vertical. I see Christian Schmid's hand, if I'm right on my screen. Christian, if you can, yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Paola. This was a very inspiring talk. And of course, we are in discussion since quite some time. And I especially like your contribution to the Geneva project, to the Grand Genève project. And I think it is in many ways, it is a project that really brings us forward. On the one hand, you have really a kind of, and that was this was the project of the Braillard project, where they somehow proposed that you have the Grand Genève. That means you have the entire area, not just the city of Geneva or the canton of Geneva, but the broad picture. And so there you have really these kind of very different territories. On the one hand, on the other, you have the split of through the borders, and then you have, and I think that's interesting, also a new kind of planning philosophy. Also brought forward by Ariane Wittmer, the new head of the planning, of the cantonal planning. And now here, I think this is really probably one of the most exciting and interesting kind of concrete planning projects you have in Switzerland. So you made a great report about that. I was very fascinated, so you showed part of it, and now you also work together directly with the cantonal planning office. So what are the chances to bring through your ideas and to somehow influence this planning kind of regime, and what are the obstacles there?
Well, at the moment, I'm not really directly work with Ariane Wittmer. I'm working on the city of Geneva. So I'm the consultant for the new PDCOM, so the Plan Directeur Communal, and it's very interesting because we are working really at the scale of the city, which is very small, the scale of the city of Geneva. But it's very interesting to understand how all the territorial themes that can percolate into really the very dense built environment, and we are discussing starting from mobility aspects and revising the logic of densification, revising the way in which you treat the public space and the space of the car completely. So I have the hope that some of the themes that were present in the Great Geneva will be able to survive until the detail of the sidewalk of the city of Geneva, which would be even important. Okay, so that's one point. With the canton, but not the service. I mean, not with Ariane Wittmer for the moment, but more with the agricultural sector. We have been working on this idea of mixing the ecosystemic approach with this social approach, and making of the term of continuity a true starting point for the possible spatial policy. I mean to work on continuities that could be at the same time ecosystemic functionalities, but also social spaces. which is really fascinating, and you touch really step by step all the different problems of the Grand Genève, just simply working with this continuous thickness of spaces that can become forest, path, agriculture, sport facilities, schools. I mean, it contains so many different things. It is touching so many different questions that is also extremely interesting, and also reveal the geography. You read the geography of the Great Geneva in a different way. You understand that among the different parts there are possible connections. It's really very interesting. So I consider myself a privileged one, because I can continue to express and to work on this area. But if I go back to what Sasha was asking about, but what is the trade-off, and also how do you solve some of the inherent contradictions? Because in my conclusion, I start with a very pessimist statement that we are not able to make it. In fact, the horizontal metropolis has been often considered just a way to name in a different, with different words, the phenomenon of this hybridization of the city. On the contrary, it was also a kind of political statement about the need to reconstruct balanced relation with the territory, you know? And I think that there is something about resiliency that is related to this balanced relation inside the territory. And I can imagine that the adaptation to climate change would be easier if we could rely on these balanced relations. And I don't know, in this moment, I'm really pessimist, because I was not ready to see that the CO2 emissions, in fact, are not lowering. Because I think that, we can become all kind of climate activists, but the fundamental point is that they are not moving, so they are still there. And I don't know, there is something that makes me very worried in a way, together with all the rest that makes us very worried. But this is also a point in which there is a kind of rigidity, no, of the system. Although rhetorically, also in Geneva, as well as in many other cities, there is a lot of discourses are all made on this. But then when you look at the data, you see that things are not changing at all. So the only hope, I think, is to imagine that this kind of work at the different scales and in the different contexts, more research-oriented, more in the practical situations, can really give a contribution to a change of paradigm. Because as I was saying in one of these seminars a few days ago, is that at the end, if we have to consider, Sasha, you were mentioning the fact that the urgency, 2030, we have to be ready. We will not have the time to transform our space, because to transform space needs a lot of time, not just resources, but time. Then the only thing I can imagine is only that we change. Maybe it's easier. We are lighter than big infrastructures. We can change in a couple of days. We can say, okay, when the pandemic arrived, we changed. In a few days, we changed completely. On the contrary, to realize new tramways line, new railways, or to transform all the agriculture, you need time and resources. But we can change. So maybe at the end of this longer path into the idea of transition, the design, the project of the transition, maybe at a certain moment we should say that we are the most flexible ones.
This is the individual is flexible. This has been shown now in the pandemics. We are even more flexible than we think. The rigidity is in the zone planning. The rigidity is in our jurisprudencia, in all our rules where we have to on the go. but the individual. And I think this is the strength of your thesis, is that you go down to a small scale, which I think this is really interesting. Of course, the problem comes up, the challenge, let's say, not the problem, is that people move and you need the big scale. Infrastructures are never a small scale topic or a big scale topic. But I think we have we could learn from the difficult times we have been now spending the last 2 years through the pandemic, that the individual has a more strength, and we are much more agile if we think in a smaller scale. But of course, I don't have a recipe. I don't know, but I think it's extremely fascinating how you look at this smaller scale. Please, Paola.
Well, I think that the smaller scale is territorial.
Yeah.
That's the way in which I see the things. The territory is made of all the scales all together. And when I read a mobility pattern, I look for is there a sidewalk and how many centimeters it is high, the sidewalk. When I look at the water network, I immediately try to figure out how is the section. Mm-hmm. And I have to make the section, so I have to know the levels. Sometimes you measure in centimeters. So I think that when you work on the territory, in which you really look at the territory is not just kind of flat, no, where you put some sign, but is this living environment. But you need to cross scales. It's not possible to think about it and in a different way. But I think that we can learn to do it. And in the new postgraduate master, we have initiated with Milica Topalovic at ETH, and Christian also a little bit inside it. And not a little bit, you are inside it. and many others. I think that we want to bring this idea of the territorial project that is different from the old one, and is not based on not very sharp and let's say very schematic decision, but with this capacity to go through the different scales and to look at this territory with different eyes, which I think are, that's a fundamental shift. And probably at the end we will change our way to live, and we will start also to realize some of these adaptations, some of this transformation that we are looking for. We have probably to move together, we as individuals and the rest, and hoping that at a certain moment there will be a kind of wave that is really taking a little bit of speed.
This is a very positive concluding and closing word, Paola. I think I was a little bit worried when you came up with the 3 and then thought, oh, it's pessimistic. We need energy for the future, but I see you're full of energy. I really want to thank you for this extremely fascinating lecture and discourse we had in the group. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you that you took the time and the preparation. I'm really extremely thankful, and want to thank you in the name of all my colleagues here at ITA and ETH. And I hope to see you soon, either here or in Lausanne, and bridging more, right, Christian? That's what we need. We need to bridge more. We have to take down.
That's a very good thing you are saying, and let's maybe imagine also to take a little bit also of position in a way, now that this kind of common work can help also from this point of view. Thank you so much.
Okay, in that sense, buona serata, buonanotte, good night, or whoever, where we all are. You never know where people are now. And thank you so much. Thank you. Grazie mille.
Thank you. Grazie.
Thank you. We'll hear from me. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Ciao. I'm closing this session. Thank you very much for everybody joining us. Cheers. Goodbye.